Good afternoon. So recently there's this video that has been appearing on my recommendations. On my recommendations I get stuff like, like the EAS content. I get why I see that on my recommendations, or elevator content. I get it why I see this on my recommendations. But there's been other stuff that has appeared on my recommendations as well, like like TikTok compilations, anime, and etc. And then there's this one particular video titled "The Ugly Truth About Mother Theresa." It's from a channel called the Infographics Show, and I'm going to display the I can't speak today. The like to dislike ratio right over here. I'm also going to display the view count. It has like 1.2 million views or something. Yeah, 1.2 million views. I'm just going to say this, I have nothing against the Infographics Show. I think the production quality on the videos, such as the animation, voiceover, and editing are really, really good. But as a Catholic, seeing this video really helped me understand that not all the information that they presented is accurate. And today we're going to be pointing out all those inaccuracies. Today, we're going to be defending Mother Teresa. Let's get started.
Mother Teresa, or should we now say Saint Teresa of Calcutta, for decades was seen on TV screens around the world, tending what she called the poorest of the poor. From San Francisco to Sydney, people's eyes filled with tears as the wizened old woman held infants in her arms and proclaimed that through the power of God Almighty she would address the many wrongs of this world and help millions whose lives had been blighted by poverty.
From the start of this video I was thinking, hey, maybe this is just clickbait. They're not actually going to say the so-called ugly truths about Mother Teresa. But then we get to this point of the video.
And yet for some, their eyes only glistened with anger. Their hearts were filled only with the beat of injustice, as they saw only too clearly a dark shadow cast by a woman who was far from the angel of the gutter she was said to be. Today, we present the ugly truth.
Those people who are angered probably don't know God, perhaps.
We imagine that the introduction has already nettled a few of our viewers who could and still cannot see anything like a dark side to the person who is called the patron saint of missionaries.
Nettled some of your viewers with an introduction? You nettled me with this particular video, and probably nettled a couple of Catholics who see the truth, the real truth. And yes, Mother Teresa is the patron saint of charity. That is true. Now we're just going to be moving on to the next part.
Maybe they're well aware that this woman was outspoken about abject poverty that certain residents of India were faced with back in the day. They can recall the devastation of the 1943 famine and how millions died of starvation and disease. This was a woman who, in the name of God, promised to live among the poor and never falter from that path. Like a martyr, she would suffer her own series of illnesses, and yet she would never turn her back on the slums. Through her missions of charity, she would tend to the people whose home was the streets and whose daily bread were the scraps people threw away. She would hold out a hand to the blind, to the lepers, and to the people that society had, for the most part, made pariahs. And it's true, we don't question it, and she and her fellow missionaries held their arms out to the poor. They did indeed offer succor to the people on the edge who felt helpless and lost. For those in the last throes of life, besieged by diseases such as HIV and tuberculosis, Mother Teresa and her sisters opened their home. For those at the start of life but without parents to care for them, she built much-needed orphanages. In her own words, Mother Teresa said with her unlimited love, she would make it her life's work to protect the hungry, the naked, the homeless, the crippled, the blind, the lepers, all those people who feel unwanted, unloved, uncared for throughout society, people that have become a burden to the society and are shunned by everyone. Maybe some of you are now thinking, Infographics Show. You're sure walking on thin ice if you're going to start throwing digs at the paragon of human virtue. We're not even done.
If they were continuing, in their words, to walk on thin ice, I wouldn't be having to make this video. I'm sure walking on thin ice making this video. Let's just continue.
Teresa and her sisters, with the help of funding on tap, opened hospices and orphanages and more all over the world. By the time she was done, her missionaries of charity consisted of 4,000 sisters and 300 brothers doing good at 610 missionaries that covered much of the globe. They were helped by over 1 million workers who did anything from giving hope to orphans to handing out free soup to the homeless. So really, why should such an apogee of humanity have to take any flack? Let us now transform into the devil's advocate.
Well, this is where the fun begins. Was it worth the wait?
As all you viewers will know, nothing in this life is cut and dried. Every story has countless other narratives running through the main narrative. Or as we're told when we're children, there are always two sides to every story.
You're so right. Nothing in this world is cut and dry.
One of the first people to start talking about chinks in Mother Teresa's gilded armor was the critic Christopher Hitchens. In fact, while she was still alive, he co-wrote and hosted a documentary called Hell's Angel. Soon after that, he wrote a book, The Missionary Position, Mother Teresa in Theory and Practice. This man certainly had a bee in his bonnet when it came to the Lady of Light. The overarching critique is that Mother Teresa and her sisters received millions upon millions of dollars to do God's work and didn't do a very good job. It's important to say God's work and not just volunteer work.
I will say this on Christopher Hitchens, he was a well-known atheist activist. Right now I'm going to display an article from CatholicLeague.org titled Donahue on Hitchens, stating, quote, discussing Mother Teresa, Donahue's disdain for Hitchens' book about her clearly came through. He particularly took issue with what he believed and a lack of supporting documentation. Hitchens, while he was alive, said none of his assertions were factually lacking. Quite frankly, it was very sloppy when it came to scholarship, Donahue said. I mean, in many respects, he was a brilliant guy. He was quick, he was provocateur, and that's part of Christopher Hitchens that I loved. But when it came to the facts, it didn't seem to matter to him. I didn't read it in the best way possible, so I fixed it up with the editing. In conclusion, it wasn't really a good idea to bring up Christopher Hitchens. Even one of the commenters pointed this out, and that comment led me to CatholicLeague.org. The full article is in the description. In conclusion, Christopher Hitchens is an atheist activist with a history of going after the Catholic Church. One article even stated that he went after Pope Benedict XVI. I will say this about Christopher Hitchens, one redeeming quality he has is that he's pro-life. That might become important later, so...
In fact, many people criticized her charities, saying that even with untold millions, they were run by people who could not provide adequate care. Pain relief was seldom given to anyone, and professional medical personnel were not often seen in the thrum of volunteers who didn't really know what they were doing. Still, for the public in the West who watched her on TV, they only saw a saint.
Alright, I just can't confirm the exact living conditions. That I cannot confirm. What Mother Teresa was trying to do was just comfort people. She was trying to comfort the poor during the dying moments.
For those who donated money, it was like doing good in the eyes of God. That can of course have certain benefits come Judgment Day. You see, during the medieval period, there was something called indulgences. In short, a person could buy their way out of hell or at least get a few of their sins scratched off of God's ethereal chalkboard. Critics believed Mother Teresa was selling indulgences, and to them it was kind of a con.
Selling indulgences? I don't think that's how... There are other ways to obtain indulgences, like attending an ordination mass is like one of the ways you can obtain an indulgence, so I don't think indulgences can be sold.
Here's what Hitchens said about that. This returns us to the medieval corruption of the church, which sold indulgences to the rich while preaching hellfire and confidence to the poor. Mother Teresa was not a friend of the poor. She was a friend of poverty. She said that suffering was a gift from God. Hitchens said he once got to talk with her face to face, and she told him outright that she wasn't trying to get rid of poverty, that she was certainly not a social worker. Her mission was to create more Catholics in the world and expand the Catholic Church. He and others argued that she was never going to try to fix poverty or lessen some of the pains that came with it. How could she be? They said her facilities were badly run, and they did not focus on methods of poverty reduction in terms of education or empowerment of women.
Poverty is not an issue that you can just go with a snap of the finger like, boom, poverty's gone. That's not how it works. Because of the imperfections of humans and original sin, which corrupted the world, these issues cannot be solved. I bet Mother Teresa was trying her best to help the poor and the impoverished.
In 2010, long after the so-called Angel of Mercy had passed away, a writer from Forbes visited one of the missions of charity and said,
Don't even get me started on Forbes. I'm just gonna say this once again, we hadn't really confirmed the conditions.
Okay, so where is that missing money? No one knows, but Forbes points out that it's controlled by the Vatican now that Mother Teresa is resting in peace.
Why don't you ask the Vatican, not Forbes? Maybe the Vatican is not really that easy to get into contact to, but still.
In peace. One of the people who should know as well as anyone about what Mother Teresa did was Dr. Arup Chatterjee. He grew up in Calcutta, and while studying to be a doctor was one of the few voices shouting about the terrible state of the poor. He did this shouting from the slums.
He did help out Christopher Hitchens with the documentary Hell's Angel. I am bringing up CatholicLeague.org once again for this.
On top of all of this, she was known to move with some very sketchy people, including neo-fascists in Italy and a dictatorship in Argentina whose members were later convicted of genocide and other crimes against humanity.
Where did they get that information?
If that's not enough to suspend us on this thin ice we're skating on, she was also called a racist. Well, actually a white savior type of racist who pitied a people that could not save themselves and needed her as a benefactor-in-chief. She was of course clapped on by giddy white people who thought their clapping helped those poor brown people, while not thinking too much about the details and genesis of widespread abject poverty. As for the Western media with its decades-long grandstanding of Mother Teresa, it too, say the critics, played a part in a kind of white colonialism. After her death, even NPR gave credence to her performance of a real-life bona fide miracle, writing, "Hardcore rationalists would not be likely to see such cases as evidence of a miracle, even while acknowledging they have no alternative explanation." As was soon pointed out, you don't have to be a hardcore rationalist to believe nuns don't make terminal brain abscesses disappear with a flick of a wrist. But this was all part of the myth, and it seemed almost everyone was in on it.
A racist? What kind of nonsense statement was that?
Can you blame Mother Teresa for that? Well, in her private diaries, she wrote about her doubts and emptiness and darkness. But that never stopped her forcing a ticket to heaven on people or demanding women should not have the right to make choices about their own bodies.
This might cause a bit of uproar, but abortion is an immoral practice. It's a murder. Remember when I said earlier that Christopher Hitchens was pro-life? And he was one of the people who made criticisms against Mother Teresa, so let's just play the clip.
Christopher, hold please. Christopher, so does that mean that are you involved in the pro-life movement in that case?
I believe that the concept unborn child is a real concept, yes. And I've had a lot of quarrels with some of my fellow materialists and secularists on this point. I think that if the concept child means anything, the concept unborn child can be said to mean something. And actually all the discoveries of embryology, which have been very considerable in the last generation or so, and of viability, appear to confirm that opinion, which is, I think it should be innate in everybody, is innate in the Hippocratic Oath, is instinct in anyone who's ever watched a sonogram, and so forth. So yes is my answer.
We'll leave you with a question someone once asked her. They asked if poor people should have to endure their suffering. Her response was, "I think it's very beautiful for the poor to accept their lot, to share it with the Passion of Christ. I think the world is being much helped by the suffering of the poor people." Now, you need to watch The Exorcism of Saint Mother Teresa.
The Exorcism of Mother Teresa? That just sounds ridiculous. That's laughably ridiculous. I will say this, what she said right over here.
Her response was, "I think it's very beautiful for the poor to accept their lot, to share it with the Passion of Christ. I think the world is being much helped by the suffering of the poor people."
That further reinforces my point of she was trying to comfort the poor during the dying moment. Just to wrap things up, this was a very difficult video to make. I had to research like different sources like catholicleague.org, notably. I may be Catholic, but I don't know everything. I'm not Jesus. So, this concludes this video. Thank you for watching Talk by South Texas Elevators EAS.